My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 61 years old, and there is one night from 1991 that I have never, not once, stopped thinking about. I was just a nurse doing a night shift. I wasn't supposed to change anyone's life that night. I wasn't supposed to change mine either. But then the call came in, and everything I thought I understood about love, abandonment, and what it means to truly see someone shattered in about 30 seconds flat. What I saw that night, I told no one for years. Not my husband, not my colleagues. Because some things burrow so deep into you that speaking them out loud feels dangerous. And here's what nobody knows yet: I kept something I was never supposed to keep. And for 30 years it sat in a drawer, waiting. Before I tell you what actually happened, if you're new here, please like this video and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to the night it all began. It was February 1991. Cold enough that your breath hung in the air like smoke. I was 3 hours into a night shift at St. Vincent's when the phone rang. A fire station 2 blocks away. The duty officer's voice was flat, practiced, but underneath it I heard something else. Discomfort. He said, "We have a baby here. Someone left him." I grabbed my coat before he finished the sentence. When I walked through that fire station door, the room was completely silent. For grown men firefighters, standing in a loose circle, nobody moving. And in the center, wrapped in a supermarket bag and a gray blanket, was a baby boy. Couldn't have been more than 3 days old. I pushed through, knelt down, and pulled the blanket back. He opened his eyes. And I froze. I have seen thousands of newborns in my career. But those eyes, dark, still, impossibly focused, looked straight at me like he'd been waiting. Like he knew. That was the moment. Right there. And I had no idea yet just how much that single moment was going to cost me. I wrapped him up properly, checked his vitals, and called it in. Healthy. Remarkably healthy. No signs of trauma. No hospital band. No note. Nothing. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Standard procedure. They asked the firefighters the same questions 3 times. Did anyone see a vehicle, a face, a direction? Nobody saw anything. Whoever left him had chosen that moment with precision. Security camera at the station had been angled at the street, not the door. That wasn't an accident. I remember standing there holding him while the officers filled out paperwork, and one thought kept hitting me. She planned this. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a teenager in a bathroom making a desperate decision. Someone had researched safe haven options. Someone had waited for the right moment. Someone had wrapped him in that blanket deliberately, placed him deliberately, and walked away deliberately. That takes a different kind of pain than most people imagine. I didn't feel angry at her. Not yet. What I felt was something colder: curiosity. Who was she? What had pushed her past every instinct a mother carries? And why, out of everything she left behind, was there absolutely nothing with his name? They took him from my arms at 2:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock the moment the social worker reached for him. I don't know why I did that. Some instinct. Like I needed to mark it. He didn't cry when she took him. Just turned his head slightly, and for 1 second those eyes found mine again across the room. I drove home in silence. Made tea I didn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table until my husband came downstairs and asked me what was wrong. I told him it was just a hard shift. That was the first lie. I went back to work the next evening and quietly asked the charge nurse what happened to the baby from the fire station. She looked at me like the question was slightly unusual, which it was, and said he'd been placed with emergency foster carers by morning. Case closed. Move on. Except I couldn't. For 3 weeks I went through my shifts normally. Ate, slept, worked. But every single newborn I handled, I checked their eyes first. Every time. Without thinking. I was looking for something I'd already seen once and couldn't name. Whatever was in that baby's eyes, it had followed me home. 6 weeks later I did something I had no business doing. I called the county social services office and asked about the baby from the February fire station drop. I didn't give my full name. I said I was a medical professional following up on a patient, which was technically true. Technically. The woman on the phone paused just long enough to make me nervous. Then she said the child was placed, stable, and no further medical follow-up was required. Call ended. I sat with that for days. Placed and stable. That's what he was now. A case number. Placement. A file sitting in someone's cabinet between 2 other files. I knew how the system worked. I'd seen it my entire career. These children move fast: emergency cares, then assessment cares, then potential long-term placement. Every move is logged. Every move is also, quietly, another severance from whatever came before. He was 3 days old when she left him. By spring he wouldn't remember the fire station, wouldn't remember the gray blanket, wouldn't remember me. But here's what I couldn't shake. I had his first moments. I was there when he opened his eyes for the first time in a room full of strangers. Nobody else had that. And I hadn't told a single person what I'd done with it. The hospital where I worked had a small administrative office that handled coordination with social services. Transfers, medical histories, that kind of thing. I knew the woman who ran it. Carol. We'd eaten lunch together dozens of times. One afternoon I stopped by her office with 2 coffees. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Then casually, so casually, I asked if abandoned infants typically got named through the system or if foster carers handled that. Carol didn't even look up from her desk. She said, "System gives them a placeholder. Carers sometimes rename. Depends on the placement." Placeholder. I drove home thinking about that word. Somewhere out there a little boy was walking around or crawling by now with a placeholder where his identity should be. No mother's choice behind it. No family history attached to it. Just whatever name was administratively convenient. I thought about my own name. Margaret. My mother picked it before I was born. She told me that story every birthday. This boy had none of that. No birth story. No name story. No mother leaning down whispering, "I chose this for you." Just a file. Just a placement. Just a system moving him forward because forward was the only direction it knew. That night I opened my bedside drawer and took out what I'd kept from the fire station. I looked at it for a long time. What I kept was small. A single photograph. One of the firefighters had taken it on a Polaroid camera. Standard procedure for abandoned infant cases, he'd said. Documentation. When the social worker left that night, somehow it stayed on the table. And somehow it ended up in my coat pocket. I told myself it was accidental for about a week. It wasn't accidental. My own children were 7 and 9 that year. Healthy, loud, completely exhausting in the best way. My husband Paul was steady, kind, present. My life was full by every reasonable measure. And still, every few months I'd open that drawer. Just to check. Like he might have changed in the photograph. Like those eyes might tell me something new. Years passed. My children grew up. I changed apartments. Paul and I moved houses twice, and both times that photograph made every single cut. Things I'd owned for decades didn't survive those moves. That photograph did. By the time he would have been starting school, I'd constructed an entire parallel life for him in my head. What he might look like. Whether he was happy. Whether anyone had told him he was wanted. Whether anyone had looked at him, really looked the way I had that night. I never spoke his name out loud. Because he didn't have one yet that belonged to him. But I thought about him constantly. Quietly. Privately. Like a secret I was keeping from myself. In 2009 I transferred to a different hospital. Bigger. Busier. A fresh start in a lot of ways. During the move I was clearing out my old locker and found a folded piece of paper tucked inside a medical journal I hadn't opened in years. I unfolded it slowly. It was a name. A case reference number. And a date of birth. February 4th. 1991. I stood completely still in that empty locker room for a long time. I didn't remember writing it down. But I recognized my own handwriting. Somewhere in those early weeks, in some quiet, desperate moment I'd apparently forgotten, I had pulled that information and written it down. His placeholder name. His case number. His birthday. I had been protecting this thread for 18 years without even knowing it. I should have thrown it away. Every professional instinct I had said, destroy it, walk away, this was never your case. Instead I folded it back up. Put it in my wallet. Told myself I'd deal with it later. Later never came. Because 3 weeks after finding that note, completely separately, through nothing but routine internet curiosity, I typed his placeholder name into a search engine. And something came back. Not much. Just a small entry on a community forum. A teenager asking questions about safe haven laws in our county. The post was dated 2007. He would have been 16. The forum post was 3 sentences long. Looking for information about safe haven laws in county around 1991. Specifically fire stations. Any help appreciated. No name. Just a username. Starter Kit 91. I stared at that screen for 40 minutes without moving. He would have been 16 when he wrote that. 16 and already pulling threads. Already feeling that gap in himself that no placement, no foster family, no placeholder name had ever filled. I clicked through his profile. Inactive since 2008. No other posts. Just that one question, sitting unanswered on a forgotten corner of the internet. Nobody had replied. That hit me harder than anything else. This boy had reached out into the world looking for the beginning of his own story, and the world had said nothing back. I created an account. Sat there with my fingers on the keyboard for a long time. Then I closed the laptop. I was 44 years old, a married NHS nurse with 2 adult children. What exactly was I going to say to a teenager I'd held for 20 minutes 18 years ago? That I'd kept his photograph? That I'd written down his case number? That I thought about his eyes more than I'd ever admitted to anyone? I closed the laptop, but I didn't clear the search history. And the next morning, before Paul was even awake, I was back at that screen. I didn't make contact in 2009, or 2010, or the 5 years after that. But I never stopped searching. Quietly, carefully, the way you do something when you already know it's slightly obsessive, but can't locate the part of yourself that cares enough to stop. By 2015, social media had changed everything. People were findable in ways they hadn't been before. And one evening in March, Paul asleep upstairs, house completely quiet. I typed that placeholder name one more time. This time a LinkedIn profile came back. Professional headshot. Mid-20s. Working in logistics in Birmingham. I stopped breathing for a moment, because the eyes in that photograph were exactly the same. 24 years had passed. He had a jaw now, broader shoulders, a professional smile. But those eyes hadn't changed one single detail. Dark, still focused. The same eyes that had looked up at me from a fire station floor in 1991. I found an email address connected to his professional profile. I wrote 17 drafts over 4 days. Deleted every single one. The 18th draft was 4 sentences. I explained who I was, where I'd been that night, what I remembered, and I gave him the choice, respond or don't. I would respect either completely. I hit send at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then I sat back and realized I hadn't taken a proper breath in about 10 minutes. His reply came 9 days later. His email was 2 paragraphs. Careful. Measured. Like someone who had learned very early to test the ground before stepping forward. He said he believed me. He said he'd spent years trying to piece together that night from public records, and had hit walls every single time. He said my email was the first real information he'd ever received from someone who was actually there. Then he asked one question. Do you know who she was? I sat with that for 3 days. Because here's what I hadn't told him yet. 6 years earlier in 2009, after closing that laptop and opening it again, I hadn't just searched for him. I'd searched for her too. And I'd found something. A woman. Same county. Obituary dated 2011. The age matched perfectly. There was a name, a survived by section listing distant relatives, and one single line that stopped me cold. She is also remembered by a child she loved in the only way she could. No elaboration. No name. Just that line. Someone who knew her had put that in deliberately. Someone who knew exactly what she'd done and why. I forwarded him the obituary without comment. 9 minutes later my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. His voice was steadier than I expected. Quiet. Controlled. He said. She died thinking nobody knew. Then silence. Neither of us spoke for almost a full minute. We met in person 4 months later. A coffee shop in Birmingham. Neutral ground. His suggestion, which I respected immediately. I arrived 12 minutes early and sat facing the door. Ordered tea I didn't touch. Watched every person who walked in. Then he walked in. And my breath just left. He was tall. Broad-shouldered. Wearing a dark jacket. And before he even reached the table I already knew. Same jawline, same stillness in the way he carried himself. Like someone who had learned to take up exactly the right amount of space. No more, no less. He sat down across from me and we looked at each other for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "You're smaller than I imagined." And somehow that broke the tension completely. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about the foster placements, 4 of them before he was 8. He told me about the family that finally kept him, good people, genuinely good. He told me about the years of low-grade wondering that never fully went away no matter how stable his life became. I told him about the photograph. He went very quiet. I took it out of my bag and slid it across the table. He picked it up with both hands. Looked at it for a long time. Set it down carefully. Then he looked up at me and said, "You kept this for 30 years. Not a question. Just a fact he was deciding what to do with." He let me keep the photograph. Said it belonged with me. That I'd carried it longer than anyone. And that meant something he didn't have words for yet. We stayed until the coffee shop started stacking chairs around us. Neither of us noticed until a young waitress politely cleared her throat twice. Outside on the pavement we stood awkwardly for a moment. That specific awkwardness of 2 people who have shared something enormous and don't yet know what shape it takes going forward. He hugged me first. Brief, firm, real. Then he stepped back and said, "I want to know more about that night." When you're ready to tell it properly. I nodded. Couldn't speak. He walked to his car. I walked to mine. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes before I could actually drive. That was 6 years ago now. We have coffee every few months. He got married 2 years ago. Lovely woman, sharp sense of humor, exactly right for him. He sent me a photograph from the wedding. I have it in the same drawer. He found some of his mother's relatives eventually. Got pieces of her story. Enough to understand without needing to forgive or condemn. And me? I'm 61 years old, still thinking about a February night in 1991 when a baby opened his eyes and looked at me like I was exactly who he needed. Maybe I was. Maybe we both were exactly where we were supposed to be.